sorry for the little delay, rushing from bench number 1 straight to here. And as you are familiar, that the Supreme Court also convened an event on the water resources and its management overall, a very comprehensive 2-day session. I think let's wait for the special guest. We should welcome her. The Honourable Minister, if I can continue. So the Supreme Court of Pakistan is also laying a lot of emphasis on the water preservation and the management of water resource. And just this morning, they were looking at the underwater aquifer and their management, and they had called the bottling companies as well, and trying to introduce some sort of a provincial tariff on the utilization of the water resource, which has been extracted from water, as Pakistan is a water-stressed country. My topic ought to be Indian violation of international water law, including the Indus Water Treaty. The Indus Water Treaty is a subset of international water law. International water law is a new, evolving area or a subset of international law. While we talk about relations between the states, we talk about treaties in various areas, we talk about prohibition of use of force, we also talk about prohibition against the threat of use of force as being violative of the Charter and the principles that Charter had enunciated. We also now talk about, in the same vein, the use of water as a possible threat of the use of force, its blockade, its use, its release, and all infrastructure associated with that as an element where one state can use it as a coercive mechanism against the territorial independence of another state. Now, since use of water in 1945, when the Charter came into existence, was not identified as a stand-alone human right, but it began to evolve as a stand-alone human right with ICCPR, which is International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and another covenant relating to social and cultural rights and economic rights. That economic rights are integrated with right to life, with the right to use of water and equitable use of water. And it was also recognized that water has to be divided amongst upper and lower riparians wherever the water course passes through various states. And there were so many examples of such states where one river is being shared by several states. So the treaties which were entered into at a bilateral level or a multilateral level for developing the sharing methodology of the water courses flowing between various states are the treaties which are the sources of international water law. They generate the jurisprudence of international water law. And they are the treaties, for example, in Africa, we have over 187 such treaties between various upper and lower riparian states, which provide for various formulas, which provide for various sharing approaches. So those approaches become case study for international water lawyers to examine that in a given circumstances, with this kind of a water flow, what should be the framework of the sharing itself. So international water law, ladies and gentlemen, has been developing at a very serious pace elsewhere in the world. We in Pakistan have been oblivion to that. We in Pakistan have not concentrated in the development, neither we have kept pace. If you look at in the last 10 or 20 years, you will hardly find any thesis coming out of PhD or MPhils relating to international water law development. Hardly. You will hardly find in any law faculty concentration being given to international water law resource allocation, mapping the trend of where the law is going and how that development of law and evolution and a stretch of law can be utilized in the interest of Pakistan's peculiar circumstances. So we haven't invested in that. And including our entities which are related within the government, to this area, whether it's Ministry of Water and Power, whether it is any other entity, a commission or a committee or whatever, have not thought of making an investment in HR relating to the development of water law, which is a strange omission, because on one hand we have strategic interests tied up, on the other hand we are choosing not to invest. If you don't invest in R&D into any area, you suffer. R&D investment is a sine qua non, or to matching steps. You can't pick up. In Pakistan, a restricted view has been that it is the treaty, Indus Water Treaty, which looks at the water issues, and that's it. We don't have to look elsewhere. We just pick up the text of the treaty, we start reading it. We start reading its schedules, we start reading its provisions, and we determine where do we stand vis-à-vis India, and that's it. I submit to this audience, international water law is far beyond the treaty. It is growing. And treaty is becoming far less important in the larger parameters of where international water law jurisprudence is developing. And we need to map the jurisprudence. For example, as you now know, environment was not considered as an integral part of the treaty provisions, because law relating to environment and conservation evolved much later. The conventions on that began to take shape in 80s and 90s, when you had a climate change framework, and now you have a climate change treaty. And pursuant to the ratification of the treaty, Pakistan had enacted Climate Change Convention Act 2017. Now this treaty is a very fundamentally very big milestone in the area of conservation, of water conservation. Because if you work it backward and see its implementation, then Pakistan has a duty, a legal obligation to switch from fossil-based to non-fossil-based. And dams are the non-fossil-based way of fulfilling your obligation under the treaty. So construction of dams becomes now a legal compulsion, if you ask me, in the lens, when I look at through the lens of the Climate Change Convention. You have an obligation. You have to retain that temperature -2 or whatever. So these are the areas that we haven't thought much about. Now coming to the treaty itself, the treaty has its limitations in terms of time, and as I said, I will always canvass for its continuation, but I will always canvass also for what has grown beyond that. The concerns that Pakistan has cannot be answered within the framework of the treaty. The security concerns that the state of Pakistan has is follows in a simplistic sense. If India will build the number of pondages it plans to build in 10-20 years, whether they are 30 or 40, it will achieve the capacity to control the water flow. And as a hostile act, it can reduce the water flow. And therefore, we will be facing a serious security situation. The question is, can we address this issue under the treaty framework? My answer is no, we can't. This is not within the jurisdiction of the treaty. The treaty does not address this issue at all. The treaty simply says that you can construct dams, and whenever you will construct a dam, 6 months before that you will submit a set of those drawings to the state of Pakistan through the Indus Water Commissioner Office. So the Water Commissioner Office will receive those set of drawings, examine them, measure them against the various annexures and schedules of the treaty. From an engineering point of view, raise objections that no, the spillway needs to be this big because that's what it says. Therefore, we object on your drawing specification. So the objections are from an engineering standpoint only. If you raise the objection, why are you building this? You can't raise this. Even if you try, you can't raise this, because this is not within the jurisdiction of the treaty. And the treaty is only addressing, so it's an engineering-based treaty, which facilitates construction, which facilitates communication, which ensures water flow as well, which guarantees the water flow. But what it does guarantee is that in the case of abuse of the treaty, openings of construction of so many pondages, if there is a potential security issue, can we address? We can't. So if you'll ask anyone who's a creature of a treaty, such as the Water Commissioner or any of the officials who are in, they will say the treaty is not violated. Take their point. It's an engineering perspective. My concern is from a legal point of view, can the water be used as a threat of the use of force once you develop that capability? And once you announce that we want to build dams as an upper riparian in Indian-held Kashmir, Site A, Site B, Site C, Site D and E and F, and so on and so forth, you announce them, you start getting approvals for them, you start going into the acquisition framework for acquisition of the land for them, you start developing pool for compensation of the people. They are very concrete steps that the state is undertaking. But I have to wait till 6 months, short of the construction period, when it becomes a fait accompli. So my submission is that if Pakistan has to object or present concern, it has to step out of the treaty. It has to step outside the treaty framework, take this matter either bilaterally with the Indian government, that look, we are quite concerned about the way you are constructing various pondages which in our view are disproportionate to the need of the valley. And we want to be satisfied. Whether you wish to use them against us or conform with your genuine needs, satisfy us. Explain it to us. So that is not the forum of Indus Water Commissioner. He doesn't have that mandate. You have to take it up bilaterally. If you are unable to receive satisfactory answers or unable to receive responses, Pakistan, in my assessment, can take this matter to the UN and give an argument that the way the trajectory of construction shows that at some point in time they'll acquire the capability where, as a riparian, we will be facing a serious threat of use of force. And therefore this matter needs to be looked into very seriously as to why they are doing it, because some might say, when I raise this issue, some might say, well, this is a very far-fetched argument. This is what I used to hear about the Indus Water Treaty when I used to say there could be a potential embedded threat in it. And everyone, whether it was treaty is intact, there's no question of abrogating it, there's no question of questioning it from the Indian side. So you don't have to feel the low, this is a very typical low riparian anxiety that you are suffering from. But lo and behold, I think 2 years back, we had Mr. Prime Minister Modi convening a very high-level meeting in New Delhi, meeting in which what is being discussed, can we abrogate Indus Water Treaty? It was an unbelievable development. No one had thought of that. We were assured by Indians all along, this kind of thing cannot happen. Not only that, it was actually postured politically like that. But then the legal advisory team of the Indian government then explained to the Prime Minister that you cannot. Revocation requires. And on that very day in the evening, I had to release a press statement, which was a headline next to a newspaper saying you cannot unilaterally revoke a treaty, Indus Water Treaty, because of its Article 12, which compels both the states to enter into a treaty for concluding the treaty. So unless that happens, the treaty is intact. And if you think of abrogating it, and if you consider and ponder the abrogation of the Indus Water Treaty, then it will be viewed as a hostile act vis-a-vis the lower riparian state. It will be viewed as an act of hostility because treaties are deemed to be terminated during the relationship of war when two states have it with them. So we will imply that this is a situation of conflict, and therefore it will give us the opportunity or vest us the right then to react in suitable measures that we may feel appropriate. So the very fact that abrogation or termination of the treaty was considered at the highest level in India is a very, very serious development. No longer it is a threat assessment, it is now a reality. That is what was being thought. So if a government next door is thinking or thought of cancelling the treaty, then what else do you expect them to think when they are building pondages and so on and so forth? So my concern is Pakistan needs to raise this issue at international legal forums and elsewhere, that the development on the Indian-held Kashmir of pondages and this plan and everything is contrary to international law, unless they are able to satisfy that they will not misuse this vis-a-vis the lower riparian. So it's not a typical lower riparian anxiety, it's a genuine threat of the use of force against the state of Pakistan. Now coming to the lower riparian, under international law, a lower riparian also has an equal responsibility to manage its resources. It cannot be wasteful in its approach. A lower riparian has a duty, just the way an upper riparian has a duty to act as a trustee for the lower riparian. It acts as a trustee, catchment area, water flowing down, retention of water, management of water. While they act as a trustee, any upper riparian, the lower riparian has no less responsibility to manage what is water coming into its territory and going out of it. If you do not manage, if you do not contain, if you do not conserve the resource, then partially you also assume responsibility for the water scarcity issue that a state faces. The other point I wish to flag is the 3 rivers that we have given to India. The water, if you go to Lahore on a motorway, you will find Ravi completely dried out. The question is, can you completely close the tap, notwithstanding you have been given the title? Now the international water law talks about a unique area, ecosystem of a river. And it says if you have an ecosystem of a river, minimum water flow must be ensured so that that ecosystem is intact. You cannot destroy. Notwithstanding you may be given a title, notwithstanding you may be given the use and right of water and everything. Now the water law jurisprudence compels any state to ensure minimum water flow. So that's yet another aspect that Pakistan needs to take up outside the treaty framework bilaterally with the Indian government. So in other words, I would formulate this as a 3-basket approach, Chairman. Basket 1, Indus Water Treaty specific issues. So if you are objecting to drawings of Kishan Ganga, Ratley, or whatever drawings are coming your way, that's basket 1 approach. Technical objections, engineering-based objections, measuring the calculations in accordance with the schedules and annexes to that. That's basket 1 issue. Basket 2 issue is the issues which are outside the treaty, which are bilateral issues, the threat of use of force, the environment, the minimum water flow of the rivers we have given to them. That's basket 2 approach. And basket 3 approach is the possibility of cancellation of a treaty and having a safeguard in that context. So 3 distinct legal baskets that I divide the issues on. We should not put in one basket all the remaining 2 issues which we have been trying to and been failing. Which once we try to, and when we ask people who are managing basket 1, which is Indus Water Commissioner or the ministry, they say, नहीं सर वो तो violation तो कोई भी नहीं हो रही है, वो water flow तो आ रहा है, तो सर वो बना तो सकते हैं सर, वो देखे ना लिखा हुआ तो कुछ भी नहीं है उसमें कि वो, भाई बात ये नहीं है, it's an issue of interpretation. It's an issue of interpretation of a treaty. A treaty is saying, जब आप डैम बना सकते हैं, इसकी मिसाल में if I can use in Urdu, I can give you this. Let there be a treaty, if there is a treaty between Delhi and Lahore, in which they say कि जी रेल जो है, रेल की पटरी की सफाई या रेल की पटरी की treaty होगी, अब उसमें लिखा होगा कि whenever the train will pass, उसके बाद रेल की पटरी की सफाई दोनों मुल्क करेंगे. Whenever the train will pass, तो उसके बाद आप उसके पेच वगैरह चेक करेंगे. मगर ये जो ट्रीटी है, ये अनलिमिटेड ट्रेन के नंबर्स को गारंटी नहीं करेगी जितनी मर्जी ट्रेनें चलाएं. उसके लिए आपको सेपरेट पॉलिटिकल अरेंजमेंट करना है. सो ये फर्ज कर लेना कि ट्रीटी, इंटरनेशनल ट्रीटी, IWT permits India to construct as many dams it feels like. I think I would not agree with this interpretation. My interpretation is it's an engineering treaty. It's a treaty which is confined to your objections based on engineering framework. If you have security concerns, step out of the treaty. Take it to the UN, take it to India itself bilaterally and make an effort to resolve this issue. I remember when the World Bank Vice President was here, so I wrote an article on that in Dawn. So a 3-basket approach, and it was well circulated even in the World Bank where they were talking about a 3-basket approach to the proposition. Because there's a confusion on how to handle this issue. So these will be my submissions before this August audience, and I hope I have been able to bring some clarity to this issue. Thank you very much.